What's up YouTube, and welcome to the Anabolic MMA channel. Now every year in the UFC we see newly hyped prospects, with some having extreme expectations before even beating a single ranked opponent. And that is exactly what I'm going to be talking about in today's video. 5 UFC prospects that I think will get their first time ranking in 2022. And as far as the hype factor goes, we have prospects all across the spectrum of hype, and even one that some people say are only just a few wins away from getting a title shot without even being ranked yet. So that is pretty much the idea of this video. Let me get into the first fighter on this list. And the first fighter we have on this list is going to be Khaos Williams. And yes, I know his real name is Kalen, but I think Khaos fits him just a little bit better. And before coming to the UFC, he fought in a variety of promotions. None of them were very notable, and he finally got his debut in February of 2020. Khaos is a 27-year-old welterweight who is currently 13-2 with 7 knockouts and 1 submission. He has had 5 fights in the UFC so far, with all 5 being somewhat recognizable names, especially for not being ranked yet. Khaos had given himself hype upon entering the UFC after starting off with back-to-back KOs in 30 seconds or less against Alex Morono and Abdul Razak Alhassan, both of which are pretty solid opponents, not to mention that they're both on a win streak since that fight has happened. He then got his biggest test of all against Michel Pereira, which was incredibly controversial, and personally, after watching the fight live, I think Khaos got robbed. His next fight, he got a decision win against Matthew Semelsberger, another guy who was on a win streak after this fight happened. And then in his most recent fight, got a knockout in the 3rd round against Miguel Baeza, who also could have even been on this list, but the hype for him has gone down since he has lost 2 in a row. And that has been Khaos Williams' run in the UFC so far. He is a knockout artist who has incredible power in his hands and is also very technical when it comes to his striking as well. Unfortunately though, there's not much else to say that's good about him right now, as he definitely has a lot of work to do, probably the most on this list. And in his most recent fight too, he was eaten alive with calf kicks, and late into the fight, he was eventually able to catch a knockout, but he was barely able to walk after, and that is definitely going to be a glaring weakness that all of his opponents are going to target in any fight forward. He is only 27 though, and after the highlights that he's put on so far, the UFC is definitely going to give him time to develop. And although I think he will definitely struggle against top opponents right now, the hype for him is there, and I could definitely see the UFC giving him a ranked opponent, and with the way he fights, there's definitely a possibility that he will catch him with his hands. I think right now, Khaos is probably 1 win away from getting a ranked opponent, but if he were to fight a ranked opponent right now, the match to make would be Santiago Ponzinibbio. Moving on to the next fighter I have on this list, and it is going to be Raoni Barcelos. Barcelos was a champion in the RFA promotion before eventually coming over to the UFC in 2018. And upon coming to the UFC, he won 5 fights in a row before losing his most recent one in a very close fight. In his first fight, he got a knockout win against Kurt Holobaugh, who unfortunately lost 2 more after that and is now out of the UFC. His next fight, arguably the best win on his resume, comes against Chris Gutierrez after submitting him in the 2nd round, and Gutierrez has won 5 fights in a row since his Barcelos fight. He then got a knockout in the 2nd round against Carlos Huachin, who is also out of the UFC himself. He then took Said Nurmagomedov to a decision, and that is Nurmagomedov's only loss in 4 fights in the UFC. In 2020, he got a decision win against Khalid Taha, and I believe Taha also got cut from the UFC, although I can't confirm this. And then in his most recent fight, which I explained was incredibly close against Timur Valiev, that was unfortunately his test to see if he's ready for a ranked opponent, but I think he'll be able to get there by the end of this year. Like I said, he's already 34 and he's 16-2, so he has plenty of experience, and skill itself is not the issue. Bantamweight is super stacked right now, including the prospects, but I think if he could get a win in his next fight, they can give him a ranked opponent. I honestly wouldn't even be mad if they gave him a ranked opponent right now anyway. If they were to give it to him right now though, I think the fight to make is Rafael Assunção. Now the third prospect I'm going to be talking about today is going to be Ilia Topuria. Now, as I was doing research for this video, Topuria actually had a fight booked for this weekend against Charles Jourdain, but this morning he pulled out after having a bad weight cut, which is discouraging to see, but he has such a bright future that I decided to leave him on this list. Topuria is a 25-year-old featherweight, and before fighting in the UFC, he fought in a variety of promotions, including Cage Warriors and Brave CF. He was 8-0 before coming over to the UFC, and since having his first fight in October of 2020, he has won 3 more in the UFC, continuing his undefeated streak. The first win came by decision against Youssef Zalal, and after that fight was over, Zalal lost 2 more and ended up being cut by the UFC. He then fought Damon Jackson in December of 2020, and while Damon Jackson isn't the highest level of UFC fighter, Topuria was able to knock him out in the first round, and this is the fight that got people really buzzing about him. Since that fight took place, Damon Jackson is on a 1-fight winning streak against Charles Rosa. And in his most recent fight in July of 2021, he defeated Ryan Hall by knockout in the first round again. And just like Damon Jackson, Ryan Hall was able to come back with a win in his next fight. And that is a very impressive win because, as many of you may know, Ryan Hall was a 12th ranked featherweight before he was removed for inactivity. So the fact that he was able to beat a fighter that should essentially be ranked right now with such ease really got the hype train going for me. One of the main reasons why I am so hyped on this guy is because he started off his career with 7 straight submission wins, and that's what he was going into the UFC. He was a submission specialist who had an excellent ground game, but in his last 4 fights, 3 of them have been won by knockout, and that's very exciting to see that his elite level grappling could be paired with some striking. And even though the 2 knockouts I just mentioned were against wrestlers themselves, I still believe that this is evidence to show that he's a very well-rounded fighter. And like I said at the beginning of this analysis, his name was recently in the news as he was actually scheduled to fight the number 13th ranked featherweight Movsar Evloev. He was then rebooked to fight against Charles Jourdain, who could easily be on this list as well. And unfortunately, Topuria pulled out, but just looking at the odds for that fight, Topuria was a -650 favorite against Charles Jourdain, who's a bit of an overlooked name, but trust me, he has been killing it lately himself. And in his current state, I think he's ready for a ranked opponent, and the UFC had it right, and they need to rebook the fight against Movsar Evloev. And now, the second to last fighter we have on this list is Phil Hawes. Hawes is actually the only fighter that is on this list to be coming off of a loss currently at the moment. But before that, he showed great potential, and that is his only loss in the UFC, and he's extremely proficient in every aspect of MMA. Hawes is a 33-year-old middleweight, and before he came to the UFC, he fought in both the PFL and Bellator promotions, and also had a fight on Dana White's Contender Series. He actually had 2 Contender Series fights, one against Julian Marquez, who has panned out as a successful middleweight in the UFC, and then he got his second one, which was a quick KO against Kadzid Bastayev. And after that fight, Bastayev went back to Bellator and ended up getting a win in his first fight since the knockout on the Contender Series. And in his UFC debut, he got an 18-second knockout victory against Jacob Malkan, who is a promising prospect himself and recently got himself a win against Abdul Razak Al Hassan directly after the Phil Hawes fight. This knockout really got the hype train going, and after that managed to get 2 more wins against impressive opponents. First against Nasruddin Imavov, who is actually now a number 12 ranked middleweight himself, and also Kyle Dawkins, another promising prospect, just showing that he has no lack of competition in the UFC, and they continue to give him tough fights that he continues to win. Unfortunately though, like I mentioned, in his most recent fight, he took a first round knockout loss against Chris Curtis, who has been on fire lately, including going 6-0 in 2021. And unfortunately, this is what people lead to believe is Phil Hawes' major weakness, which is his chin. And personally, I don't necessarily agree with this yet, although I could see where they're coming from. He only has 1 other knockout loss on his resume. Other than that though, he has all the attributes that you look for in a fighter. Obviously, he is proficient on the feet as we've seen with his knockout power, but before coming to the UFC, he actually had a wrestling background. And although I haven't seen him face a proficient grappler yet, in the grappling exchanges that I have seen, I was very impressed. There is also a question about his cardio due to his bodybuilding-esque physique, but since coming to the UFC, he has 2 decision victories, and both times it looked like he could have gone 2 more rounds if he wanted to. Now currently, Phil Hawes is coming off of that knockout loss that I just mentioned, so I don't think it would be fair for him to get a ranked opponent right now, but he probably is only 1 win away from getting that opponent. But if they did give it to him right now, I think they should book a fight against the number 12 ranked middleweight, Nasruddin Imavov, making Imavov versus Hawes 2. As that was Imavov's only UFC loss, and it came in a majority decision, and I think Imavov would like to have that back, while also giving Phil Hawes a chance to get into the rankings. And finally, the number 1 fighter most likely to be ranked by the end of 2022 is going to be Alex Pereira. In my opinion, Pereira is easily the most hyped non-ranked fighter in the UFC right now, as arguably the greatest kickboxer of all time is now making the transition over to MMA. And he is most famous for having 2 kickboxing wins against UFC champion Israel Adesanya, including Adesanya's only knockout loss in over 100 professional combat sports fights. Alex Pereira is a 34-year-old middleweight who is currently 4-1 in MMA. He has fought in both the Jungle Fight promotion and LFA before coming to the UFC in 2021. And all of those bouts before the UFC have come in the middle of his kickboxing career, so they're really spaced out and it's hard to take much away from him. He actually lost his first career professional MMA fight by submission, but that was back in 2015, and after that he got 3 straight early knockouts before getting his first UFC fight in November of 2021 against Andreas Michailidis, where he got another knockout victory in the second round. And in that fight he was taken down, but he was able to get right back up, and although he didn't show much offense on the ground, all you really need is the defense to be able to get back on the feet and show off your kickboxing skills, where he eventually got a highlight flying knee that really jump-started his UFC hype. And honestly, I'm hopping right on the hype train, as not only is he going to be ranked, I think he's going to be a future UFC champion. And obviously he has a lot to prove, but if you told me that he was a top 5 striker in the UFC right now, I honestly would not disagree with you. Not only that, but I know that the UFC sees this as well, and I think that they are fast-tracking him to a title shot against Adesanya, as that would be a huge fight with him already having 2 wins against him. He does have a huge fight coming up though against Bruno Silva, who is currently on a 7-fight winning streak himself, with all 7 of those wins coming by knockout. Matter of fact, he has 19 wins by knockout with 0 losses, so this should really be a striking clinic with the both of them going at it. And whoever wins this fight is not only getting a ranked opponent, but they are probably going to get a top-ranked opponent at that. And if he does win this upcoming fight, I think the fight to make is against the number 8 ranked middleweight Darren Till. And that is all I have for you in today's video. 5 prospects that I think are most likely to be ranked by the end of 2022. So as always, let me know if you agreed with these predictions, and if you have any other names you want to drop in the comments down below, I would be happy to respond to them if I agree or disagree. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.